In 2016, Australia was shocked by the horrifying actions of a man named Roman Heinze, a man whose twisted fantasies led him to lure unsuspecting women, mostly backpackers, into his jeep, promising a ride to remote destinations. But what awaited them was far from what they could imagine. Heinze kidnapped women, subjected them to unimaginable terror, and left some scarred for life.
I don't think there's a word that I could find or create to describe what that did to me. Do they think I'd put those bruises on myself because I didn't go to the police and report him, so that all went against me? It's so unfair.
Despite previous reports from women who managed to escape, authorities failed to take the threat seriously. It wasn't until two young backpackers, Lena from Germany and Beatriz from Brazil, found themselves trapped in his web, that the truth about Roman Heinze's monstrous acts came to light. Their courage to survive and fight back against Heinze would eventually lead to his arrest. But it wasn't just their strength that brought him down. Their escape, their desperate battle for survival, and their decision to go to the police turned out to be the catalyst for his final downfall.
We'd only gone about a K and we could see this vehicle parked up on the sandhill. I guess that's when everything got really real, because it already was, but now it's like, there he is. When he put those cuffs on him, you couldn't imagine what it was like to have that relief, to know that that guy's there, he's now got the cuffs on, there's no one else. He can't hurt anyone else, not today.
But before Heinze was finally caught, he had already left a trail of destruction. Both girls were rushed to the hospital, with Lena barely clinging to consciousness, barely alive. This is the story of Lena and Beatriz, their heart-stopping ordeal, their unwavering bravery, and how, against all odds, they emerged alive. Meet Lena, a 23-year-old backpacker from Germany. For years she had dreamed of exploring Australia, a land of vast deserts, lush forests, and endless adventure. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Lena had longed for this trip, so in 2016 she finally made it happen. Her goal? To see it all. The landscapes, the culture, the raw beauty of Australia. Before leaving, Lena watched Wolf Creek, a film infamous among travelers. Many backpackers watch it before visiting Australia, brushing it off as fiction. But the plot? It was unsettling. A group of young tourists hunted in the vast Australian outback. In the movie, the backpackers are hunted, trapped in the middle of nowhere by a sadistic killer. After watching, a friend jokingly voiced concern. What if something like this really happens? Lena laughed it off, calling it pure fiction. But what she didn't know was that the story was inspired by true events. Lena finally arrived in Australia, settling into a hostel in Adelaide, a city in southern Australia. Hostels bustle with hubs where travelers connect, share stories, and plan their next move. It was here that she met Beatriz. Beatriz, a fellow traveler from Brazil, was also 23. They shared the same adventurous spirit, the same excitement for exploring Australia. The connection was instant. Within days, they became inseparable. During their conversations, they discovered they had the same plan, driving from Adelaide to Melbourne. But not just any route. They wanted to experience the Great Ocean Road, one of the most scenic drives in the world. The journey stretched 1,000 kilometers, around 620 miles. A direct drive would take about 13 to 14 hours, but no one rushes this route. The Great Ocean Road is meant to be savored. Most travelers spend 5 days on this journey, camping, exploring, soaking in the breathtaking views. It was perfect. Why not do it together? They wasted no time and started planning. But there was one problem. Neither of them had a car. In Australia, travelers often turn to online platforms like Facebook or Gumtree to find rides, job listings, or even travel companions. From job offers to advice, these sites had everything. Beatrice and Lena posted their request. Two young backpackers looking for a ride to Melbourne, hoping to find someone heading that way soon. Maybe someone was already making the trip and wouldn't mind sharing fuel costs. Their post got a few responses. One in particular stood out, a man close to their age offering them a ride. The man assured them they could tag along. He was already planning the journey. Everything seemed to fall into place. But then, at the last moment, something went wrong. Their ride was gone. The man cancelled at the last minute due to car troubles. Suddenly they were back to square one, scrambling for another way to make the trip happen. Left with no choice, they revisited the other replies. Only one remained. A 59-year-old man named Roman Hines. When they spoke to him, something felt off. His messages were abrupt, impatient. He pushed for quick responses, sometimes sending multiple texts in a row. The girls hesitated, but dismissed it. Maybe it was just his age. If they took too long to reply, he bombarded them with texts. Warnings not to waste his time. The pressure was unsettling. But with no other options, they agreed. February 9th, 2016, the day they were set to meet Roman. They chose a meeting spot, made their way there, and found him already waiting. A brief greeting, their bags loaded into the trunk, no second thoughts. They got into his car and the journey began. But what they didn't know was that they had just stepped into the vehicle of one of Australia's most dangerous predators. Born in West Germany, Roman moved to Australia in 1959 with his family. He married twice. Both marriages failed. 5 children, but no real connections. Roman had a temper, a violent one. His past was dark, filled with crimes that should have placed him under strict police watch, but they didn't, and that failure would prove disastrous. What happened next is nothing short of enraging. In 2014, Roman picked up a woman in Adelaide, but once they reached a deserted area, he attacked her. He was caught, found guilty, but instead of prison, he was placed on a good behavior bond. His only restriction? No online contact with strangers. A rule he would soon break. By December, he had already broken that bond, assaulting another woman, yet somehow he remained free. No real punishment, no jail time. Then, just weeks before Beatrice and Lena stepped into his car, another woman crossed his path. His ex-girlfriend, Sylvia Clark. One night while staying at Roman's house, Sylvia woke up to a nightmare, her left hand tied to the bed. Panic set in, she looked around. Roman loomed over her. Then came the blows, the bites, the assault. Paralyzed with fear, Sylvia didn't fight back. When it was over, she left. She ended the relationship. And most importantly, she cancelled a camping trip to Salt Creek. She didn't report it. Shame, fear, maybe a little of both. But had she spoken out, maybe what happened next could have been stopped. This was Roman Hines, a predator hidden in plain sight. And now, he had 2 young women trapped in his car. Alone. The drive seemed ordinary, until Roman suddenly veered off course. No warning, no explanation, just a turn towards Salt Creek. Salt Creek, a remote settlement buried in the vast wilderness of southern Australia, 164 kilometers from Adelaide, a place where only the well-prepared survive. It was the perfect hunting ground, isolated, desolate and silent, a place where a man like Roman could do whatever he pleased and no one would hear a thing. Roman parked the car. "We'll camp here for the night," he said. The girls exchanged uneasy glances. There wasn't a soul in sight. But up until now, Roman had been patient. He let them stop for pictures, acted polite. There was no reason to suspect danger. Not yet. As Roman unpacked the gear, his silence felt heavy. Something about him was off. Not enough to panic, but enough to notice. Lena, exhausted from the long day, climbed into the car to rest. Beatrice, still full of energy, stayed outside, helping Roman set up camp. With Lena asleep, Roman turned to Beatrice. He pointed at tracks in the sand. "Kangaroo footprints," he said. "Want to see them up close? I can track them." It seemed harmless, a little adventure. Trusting that he knew the land better than she did, Beatrice followed. They walked deeper into the dunes, the campsite fading behind them. But after minutes of searching, no kangaroos. Just silence. Beatrice sighed. "It's okay, let's head back. Maybe we'll see some later." She turned to leave. Before she could take another step, Roman struck. An arm around her neck, a forceful shove. Beatrice crashed to the ground. From his pants, Roman pulled out a hammer, a knife, and then rope. He held up the knife. The message was clear: don't resist. Then he reached for the rope. Beatrice fought. She grabbed at the rope, struggling to break free. Roman growled, "If you fight, I'll break your arms. You'll only make it worse." Roman's grip tightened. He licked her skin, his breath hot against her. Beatrice begged him to stop, but he didn't. Her cries only fueled his rage. He struck her, again and again. In that moment, Beatrice realized she might not make it out alive. Then, an idea, a dangerous gamble. Beatrice whispered, "I want this too, but let's not do it out here. Let's go back to camp." Roman hesitated. Then, he believed her. He yanked Beatrice to her feet and led her back toward camp. But just as the camp came into view, Roman hesitated. His eyes darkened. Maybe he realized Beatrice was playing him. She was leading him back, not out of submission, but for survival. Then, without warning, he turned. He gripped her arm, dragging her away from the camp once more, away from any chance of rescue. Terror surged through Beatrice. She knew this was it, her last chance. She threw her head back and screamed, "Lena!" The sound shattered the night air. Roman snapped. He drove his fists into her face, her ribs, again and again. He needed her silent. In the car, Lena stirred, a distant sound, then clearer. Screams. Beatrice's screams. Panic surged through her chest, but there was no time for fear. She ran toward the screams, toward her friend. Then she saw it. Beatrice, on the ground, naked, bruised. Roman stood over her, his chest heaving. Lena froze. Her breath caught. But then she found her voice. "Let her go." Roman lifted his head. His eyes locked onto Lena. Slowly he stepped toward her. From the ground, Beatrice gasped, "Run, Lena, he has a knife." Heart pounding, Lena bolted for the car. Her phone, she needed her phone. But Roman was faster. As Lena dug through the car, she felt a presence behind her. Then, impact. The hammer slammed into her skull. A sickening crack. Lena staggered. Blood poured. It ran down her face, staining the sand beneath her. The world spun. Just minutes ago she had been asleep. Now her friend was being assaulted, and she was bleeding out. Everything blurred, but instinct took over. Lena fought. Roman came at her, wild, frenzied. Lena fought back with everything she had. The hammer struck again, and again, 3 times in total, each blow worse than the last. Blood drenched her. She was weak, fading, but she ran. Somehow she ran. Raman didn't chase on foot. He got into his car. The engine roared. Lena sprinted toward Beatrice, breathless. They locked eyes. They were together, but they were still in danger. Beatrice trembled, still exposed, still afraid. But now she saw Lena, bloodied, broken, and she knew things had gotten even worse. There was no time to talk, no time to think. They turned. Roman was coming. There was only one way to survive. They split, running in opposite directions, praying he'd choose wrong. Beatrice disappeared into the bushes, heart pounding. But Roman's eyes weren't on her, they were on Lena. He turned the wheel and followed her. Lena sprinted through the dunes, but Roman was right behind her. The car roared forward, closing the distance. For over a kilometer she ran, running for her life. She weaved, darting left, then right, anything to avoid the crushing weight of his tires. Roman wouldn't stop. If she slowed, if she stumbled, it was over. A brutal, merciless death awaited. She had no choice. She had to keep running. The heat, the blood loss, the pain. Her body couldn't take much more. She started to slow. She couldn't keep running. Not against a car. This was a losing battle. But Lena wasn't ready to give up. Roman's car had hit loose sand, slowing him down. She had seconds, just seconds, to make a move. Instead of running away, Lena ran toward him. In one desperate move, she leapt onto the car, grabbing the hood, then scrambling onto the roof. Her head was still bleeding, dripping. The hot metal of the car turned red beneath her. Roman lost it. Screaming, cursing, he slammed his fist on the steering wheel. Get down! The car swerved violently, left, right. Roman tried to fling her off like dead weight. Far away, Beatrice lay hidden, breath shallow, ears straining. Then a sound. A car. Hope. A car? Out here? It was rare, too rare. This was her chance. Maybe her only chance. A group of young men cruised along the scenic route. Then, out of nowhere, Beatrice, naked, wild-eyed, she threw herself onto the road, waving frantically. They froze, confused, alarmed, but they didn't hesitate. They threw open the door, pulling Beatrice inside. Between gasps, Beatrice spoke the words that made their blood run cold. A man attacked me. My friend is still out there. He's trying to kill her. They called the police, but out here, help wasn't coming fast enough. They told her they should leave, get her to safety, but Beatrice refused. Tears in her eyes, she begged, "We have to find Lena." And without hesitation, they drove toward the danger. As they sped through the dunes, Lena was still clinging to the roof of Roman's car. Then, suddenly, the car stopped. Roman stepped out, his rage burning. "Get down," he snarled. Lena narrowed her eyes. "I'll come down," she said. "But first, throw away your weapons." Roman scoffed, shaking his head. "This is ridiculous." But then, he did it. He threw the weapons away. His rage faded, at least on the surface. Lena played along, stepping back into the car. But she wasn't done fighting yet. Roman turned the key. The engine roared back to life. Slowly they drove, back toward the campsite. Lena's body screamed for rest. She was weak, drained, barely holding on. Then, she saw them. A group of fishermen by the shore. This was it, her chance. With the last of her strength, she raised her bloodied arm, waving, begging. The fishermen turned, their eyes locking onto the sight. A woman's arm, soaked in blood, dangling from the window. They froze. Shock, horror, then action! Without hesitation, they jumped into their vehicles, speeding after Roman. Through the dunes, they chased him. closing in, until finally, Roman had nowhere left to run. The door flung open. Lena stumbled out. She was free. Roman exhaled sharply. He knew. It was over. There was no escaping this. With one last desperate move, he sped off, hoping somehow to disappear before the police arrived. But it didn't matter anymore. The girls were safe, and now Roman was a fugitive. Sirens cut through the air. Police, medics. The girls, battered and broken, were finally in safe hands. Lena had fought for hours, through blood loss, through agony. Now, her body was failing.
She was unconscious, like really full of blood, and I was feeling so guilty to see her like that because I invited her for the trip. I put her in that situation, you know, and I feel like, oh my God, she's gonna be so mad at me. She's never gonna forgive me. And I was all the time crying because I was so concerned about her.
The ambulance sped through the night. Lena's vision blurred. Then, darkness. She was out. While Lena fought for her life, police launched a manhunt. Roman Hines wouldn't get far. One man knew these lands better than anyone, Adam Stewart, a local shop owner. His shop was the only one for miles. He knew the dunes, the roads, the hideouts. When police asked for help, Adam didn't hesitate. Adam had a hunch, and he was right. It didn't take long. They found him. His car trapped in the sand, wheels spinning, but going nowhere. Police swarmed in. Roman Hines, the predator, was finally in cuffs. Back in the hospital, Lena clung to life. Hours later, she opened her eyes. She had survived. When she arrived, doctors could barely recognize her. Blood, sand, swollen skin. For a moment, they weren't even sure if she was male or female. Beatrice and Lena met again, this time in a hospital room. Silent tears fell. They were lucky they were alive.
Once we got into the hospital, I held her hands. I held her hands, and then she said, "Beatrice," with such a sweet voice. And in that moment, I knew, like, she forgave me.
The law finally caught up with Roman. Aggravated kidnapping, indecent assault, intent to harm, endangering life, false imprisonment, assault. The list was long and damning. The story spread like wildfire, a chilling reminder of the dangers lurking in the outback. Sylvia's heart sank. His face, his name, Salt Creek. It was all over the news, and guilt consumed her.
I was shocked. Absolutely shocked. Then I went into a meltdown. And I thought if I'd have said something, these girls would have been saved, because they probably would have locked him up.
Did you have any doubt at that point that he had done what he was being accused of?
No doubt at all. I just thank God, and that's the first thing in my mind, thank God that there was someone on the beach, because there's no way in this world those girls would have got away otherwise. I have no doubt in my mind that he'd have killed them.
She couldn't stop thinking, what if she had reported him? Would Lena and Beatrice have been spared? But deep down she knew the truth. Roman had been caught before. The system had failed before. Would her voice have made a difference? Maybe. Maybe not. Then, a chilling thought. Salt Creek, that trip he planned before their breakup. Had she stayed, she could have been next. February 2017. Roman Hines stood trial. The Supreme Court of South Australia was now the stage for his reckoning. The evidence was undeniable. Lena's brutal injuries, the blood-soaked car roof, the horror etched into every image. Then Sylvia took the stand. She told her story.
I don't think there's a word that I could find or create to describe what that did to me. Do they think I'd put those bruises on myself because I didn't go to the police and report him, so that all went against me? It's so unfair.
The abuse, the assaults, she even had photos to prove it. But then, a shock. The judge dismissed her case, ruled Roman not guilty, said no crime had taken place. It was clear, even if she had spoken out sooner, the system might have still let him go. Then a darker truth surfaced. Roman's internet history. Twisted, violent content. The sick fantasies he had fed for years. There was no doubt, this man was pure danger. The court saw his messages, 12 more backpackers. He had been hunting for victims, long before Lena and Beatrice. It was undeniable. Roman Hines wasn't just an attacker. He was a serial killer waiting for his moment. Finally, a verdict. Guilty, Roman Hines was sentenced to 22 years behind bars. And justice was served. Roman Hines would likely never walk free again. Lena and Beatrice didn't just survive. They fought back. Their bravery saved them both. And they weren't alone. Strangers stepped in, risking everything to stop a monster. They had no idea if Roman had a gun, but they didn't hesitate. Stories like this remind us, for every monster, there are good people willing to stand up. But before we end, let me leave you with something truly unsettling. A chilling revelation. Witnesses came forward. Roman had been seen at Salt Creek before. He wasn't alone. A girl sat in his passenger seat. A young traveler. Days later, Roman came back. Alone, the girl was gone. No one knows her name. No one ever saw her again. Some believe she still lies somewhere, buried in the dunes of Salt Creek.